The 95 Libyan nationals who were arrested on a farm outside White River in Mpumalanga will appear in the local magistrate's court later today. The case was delayed to allow time to find an Arab interpreter. The foreign nationals are alleged to have been receiving training at an illegal military training camp, but for what purpose? Foreign policy analyst Peter Fabricius is now joining us. Peter, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Looking at the article that was published in ISS today, and speaking to Jalil Harachua, who is a Libya expert at the Royal United Services Institute. What did he say about this?
Yeah, he seems to believe, I mean, no one's 100% certain, I don't think, that these are actually people who were, hired by somebody in the Haftar family. You know, there's the Khalifa Haftar is in effect some would think him perhaps the leader of the eastern government of a divided Libya. You know, there's an eastern government and a western government based in Tripoli. And Haftar is a military man. They call him General or Marshal Haftar, and he actually has led the forces of the East. He led them in 2020 in an attempt to assault Tripoli, capture Tripoli on the other side, the more officially recognized capital of Libya. And that, although there's been no open fighting for a couple of years, there's still a huge dispute between them about who should be running the country. And he maintains quite a strong military force. And Jalil Harachua was suggesting that from the evidence he's seen, that he was the one behind these sending these people here for military training, even though they ostensibly only came to do private security guard training. That we're going to discover more about, I guess, in court today.
Yeah, just quickly for the interest of our viewers, just an explanation in terms of what's happening in Libya. You've got the east, and then you also got the western parts. We also have reference that's being made to the National Stability Government as well as the Government of National Unity, but these are two different entities, although both are actually in Libya.
Yeah, you know, basically the chaos that engulfed the country after Muammar Gaddafi was toppled in 2011 has never resolved fully, you know, and it's gradually towards 2015, 16, 17, 18 onwards evolved into like a split polarization of forces on the east and the west. You know, Tripoli, the historical capital, as a government which is recognized by the UN and South Africa and most countries, and then on the other side in the east, in Tobruk and Benghazi, is an opposing government. And as I was saying earlier, there in 1920 they had open conflict, and in fact the army of the east, led by Khalifa Haftar, who we're talking about now, came very close to capturing Tripoli. Since then, it's by force of negotiations and so on, and also a kind of military stalemate, actually, because Turkey entered the conflict on the side of Tripoli in 2020 and stopped Haftar from capturing Tripoli. So there is a kind of military stalemate, and there's also a political stalemate. Lots of efforts to try and reunify the country into a single entity and, to overcome these east-west divisions, but nothing seems to be working.
Yeah, and I want to get to this point as well. Why is it assumed that the 95 could be linked to the so-called the Haftars? And again, basing this on the reports that are coming out of Libya, one of the local newspapers there, Assad, reporting that the Government of National Unity has condemned any actions that could threaten peace, security, or the sovereignty of neighboring or friendly countries. Whereas on the other end, you have the National Stability Government, represented by its acting foreign minister there, Abdel Hadi Al-Juwayr, saying that there are plans to provide legal support for the Libyans detained abroad.
It's to some degree because of I don't know exactly what the evidence was. I mean, that seems to be what Jalil Khoy and others have heard. But part of the evidence is that the Eastern government, that foreign minister you mentioned, he actually issued a statement on Twitter or whatever almost immediately to say that they would be sending legal representation to make sure that they're all okay. And I'm assuming that we will discover today if there's any more evidence on the side of, that our intelligence and law enforcement agencies have. But there does seem to be a kind of something like a consensus that it's somebody from that side. They're also, I guess, more militant. And the other government, the government in Tripoli is in a slightly awkward situation. It's condemned it, which is interesting. That also is one of the clues, which the Eastern government hasn't. Mm-hmm. But as the recognized, the internationally recognized government, it does have a certain obligation to offer, consular services to find out these guys are being treated okay and they're legally represented and so on.
Yeah. And then when I spoke to one of the accused just before that court appearance, they said they are denying the allegations that they've received military training. They say they were appointed by a business tycoon in Libya who is trading in gold, and they were to become private security. But since the arrest, the so-called business tycoon has never been in contact with them, never mind speaking even to the organization that was training these Libyans.
Yeah. Yeah, look, who knows? I mean, that may prove to be true. On the other hand, that is the obvious pretext that they would use. It's been, suggested, because I guess people understand that it's not acceptable to send, your nationals abroad for military training, and they may well also understand that in this country it's illegal, for that to be done. We still have to see. I mean, one has to assume that our government doesn't believe that story either, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, if they were receiving purely, security guard training, that might be acceptable. Although, on the other hand, perhaps in terms of our law, even if you're getting private security guard training, you would need to get the permission of the authorities. But they've been charged so far for misrepresenting the purpose of their visit. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? That does suggest that our government doesn't believe their story about private security guard training. But today should be, I hope, something of a revelation.
Yeah, and finally, so you have 95 people that came into the country. One security expert was saying that on its own should have been a red flag and should have actually triggered law enforcement to do further investigations, even through Home Affairs. But then on the other end, you have the United Nations Security Council's resolution that was taken, the sanctions imposing the arms embargo. Remember that particular. So, which means that there is a great issue that is at play in Libya, and considering that volatility in Libya, shouldn't we have been more heightened? Considering that you have 95 people from Libya all coming in at once and have been in the country for 4 months.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to me that there's a failure of our intelligence here. I think this is what you're saying. For whatever reason, our intelligence services have been obviously not functioning at 100% efficiency for some time, although we presume they've improved since the Zuma era. But yeah, and I believe that UN embargo doesn't only apply to physical arms and weapons, but it also applies to providing military services. So in that sense, arguably this enterprise has also violated the UN embargo. Mm-hmm.
And sorry, just the question that came to mind now that you've mentioned the issue around the Security Council's embargo is, if you look at the remarks that were made a couple of years ago by the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, where he accused South Africa of harboring a terrorist and people want to overthrow the government of Rwanda. When we look at what's currently happening, and if there is any indication whatsoever that here, once again, South Africa could stand accused of harboring terrorists.
Yeah, I mean,
it is a bit of a stretch.
Kagame has his own, motives for what he's saying, and I mean, the reason South Africa has not handed over those people that he accuses of trying to topple him is that they don't really completely trust his motives for that, or what would happen to them. But yes, I mean, in this case, look, the situation in Libya is incredibly unstable. So who's trying to overturn who is another issue. But in any case, in terms of our own law, apparently we're not supposed to provide either military material or personnel to a country in which there is such instability.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. That is Peter Fabricius, who's a foreign policy analyst on the 95 Libyans, who will be appearing in court a bit later on today.